Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. This is the Leadership Toolkit, and I am so excited today. First, because we've got the stream, it doesn't matter. Technical difficulties cannot hold us down. We are here and ready to serve you. So, as you know, on this podcast each week, I go live at around 12:05 Mountain Time, and we talk about leadership. What are people's wins? What are people's losses? I have collaborative, great conversations with people from all different verticals of business to be able to grow yourself and grow your team. And so today I am so excited. I have just an absolutely phenomenal guest. She is the executive vice president for Stream Companies. She's on the board of the Women of Color Automotive Network, or a founder of that. And I mean, you have so much stuff. I bring on today Subi Ghosh, who is a good friend and has just an absolute wealth of knowledge. She's been rated 40 under 40 by Auto Remarketing for top women in retail automotive. She's an amazing marketer. She is an absolutely phenomenal leader and just an all around fantastic person. So I'm very excited to have Subi on today. We had a few technical difficulties, but we are here. So welcome to the show, Subi.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to having this discussion. I've seen your clips all over and excited to participate.
Absolutely. So if you would just take a few minutes, and for the audience and the people that are here, if you would share with them sort of your background, because I don't even feel I can do it justice. You have so many amazing things that you've done in your career, and share a little bit of your background, who you are, your leadership experience, and then let's get into some Q&A and some conversation.
Sure. I was a leader at birth. I'm the oldest of 19 grandchildren on my mom's side, so it was just kind of instilled in me to just lead, or else really there would be chaos. And and then from there, I just kind of shied away from anything leadership. I was more of the follower all throughout school. And then at some point in college, as I was struggling with some health shifts that kind of threw me in a different direction than what I thought I would be doing,
Mm-hmm.
my husband, boyfriend at the time, found a job for me at a local dealership to be a marketing assistant. And while marketing was always something that was interesting to me, advertising was interesting to me, but it wasn't something I ever made into a even a potential step. So I just went, they gave me the job, and I was hungry to learn. So started applying and learning and found that I was really good at it and leaned into it. But the automotive realm, especially 15 years ago, didn't have a lot of structure. So
Sure.
I took what I learned in school, I took what I knew that customers would want, and just started putting structures in place and focusing on culture and focusing on just what should be better. I am far better at fighting for other people than for myself. So this voice that I didn't realize I had just started to take shape. And then I started communicating and asking a bunch of questions, just wanting to learn as much as I could in forums. And then additionally adding on that advocacy element of this is what people in my role need. And this is this is what we've been fighting with. And over time, I made a lot of industry contacts that asked me to participate on stages and debates and speaking. And I just continued to build my voice from there and got the director of e-commerce position for that particular group that I was at. And then grew into a sales and e-commerce director role, um, managing the sales processes and bridging that with the online processes, because the
Mm-hmm.
GM at that location felt like we really couldn't do one without the other. So wanted me to bridge those things and help people evolve to what consumers should be experiencing. And then I made my way over to the agency world and have not really looked back. I became the executive vice president of a company called Dealer Authority. And then I started as the director of strategy at Stream about 7 years ago. And then I was offered growth opportunities because they were putting me in seats that they thought I would be better at, or they knew that I would thrive in that I didn't really have the confidence to do in myself. Um,
Sure.
and so I took those opportunities and have learned far more um, in the 7 years that I've been at Stream than the times that I was speaking about leadership and culture. Now I get to kind of see it from someone who's built a company with 28 years of consecutive growth. And I find that I'm developing more as a leader just watching him work. And I admire the heck out of David Wren, our CEO and co-founder at Stream. And so just, I think it's wonderful to be able to be continuously hungry and actively learning. And that was something I was missing as I was the person at the top. So I learned about myself that I continue to want to be a student and don't want to be the person at the top just yet. And that, I think, set a fire in me. And now I'm re-engaging and out here speaking again after spending some time just learning again. And at some point, I was one of the founders of Women in Automotive. And
Yes.
now I've joined the incredible ladies, stepping down from Women in Automotive, and now joining Carrie Wise and some incredible women at the Women of Color Auto Network at WOCAN, because there's just so much work to be done.
That's, I mean, that is such an outstanding, just what an amazing background. And I got to share a story here because I remember, so you and I connected on social, I don't even know, probably 10 years ago. And I
Yeah.
remember you were somebody that in my career, because I've been in automotive just over 20 years now. And I remember in my career seeing you and going, man, I want to be at that level. Like, that's awesome. Right. Just because we see, and I get it. I understand you would be like, hey, listen, there's a lot of work behind the scenes and so
Yeah,
forth. But I think for a couple things from the consumer side of things on social media, we pick and choose what we see too, right? And so it gives us a
absolutely.
perception of somebody. And I remember finally connecting in person with you. It was either 2017 or 2018. And one of the things that I thought was just absolutely awesome, and when you're talking about, hey, being a continuous learner and a continuous leader, was because from my perspective, I had said, hey, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of positives about that person that I feel like I could learn from. And you remember we were in Vegas at a conference, and you were like, "Hey, let's go to this mob museum." And I'm like, "What the heck is that even?" Do you remember that? And I said, "What the heck is that?" But here's the thing: just like you saying you were going to take opportunities, I was like, "I am absolutely. I have no idea what the." I was like, "Did she just say mob museum? Is it like the mob, right?" But I knew that I was like, okay, I that's an opportunity to connect on a real, genuine grassroots level with people that you're not in a regular environment of business and automotive. And to me,
Yeah,
that was something that I thought was so awesome about you was you were very much leading from the front, leading by example, just saying, hey, yeah, let's go do this. We'll figure it out. I'm like, I don't even know what this is, but okay. And you had such an eclectic mix of people that went. You remember that?
it was a ragtag crew.
It was, it
I
was.
I was in a phase. There were two things happening in that moment.
Mhm.
And one was I had traveled so much and I'd never really seen any of the places that I had traveled to. It was airport, convention hall, airport.
Right.
And so I was just itching to get out and do something. But I'm also the person that if someone is alone, I want to include them. Growing up, I was bullied in school and for me, I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're on the outside. I want them to feel included. So I just bring anybody who doesn't have any plans. Let's go do something. We'll figure it out as we go. If there's no reservations, there's always another restaurant. So the Mob
Absolutely.
Museum was just something different.
Well, and I know it's silly we go there, but for me, that is still a cherished memory and of leadership of you just grabbing people and saying, "Hey, let's go. We're going to do this. This is going to happen." Hey, Joe. Hey, Scott. Good to see you guys. So moving from that, because you're talking about, hey, there's this constant learning, there's this constant growth in leadership, and people putting you in positions that you didn't feel, yeah, and I think this was your words, you did not feel quite ready for, but
Yeah.
they could see the potential in you.
Yeah.
So how did you mentally prepare yourself to say, because if they're pushing you, and obviously you've taken those roles over time, right? You kept moving forward. What are the first couple of things that you did or that you would recommend for others to do to prepare themselves mentally for like, hey, this is coming whether you're ready for it or not?
Okay, so quick fire, I would say do it scared. I think so much of the decision to move forward is, do I do I have enough information? Do I have enough research? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I going to do everything that they need me to do? And the reality is no one has all the answers, and I don't know a single job outside of maybe medical, um, that doesn't Google something at some point, right? We're always there's everything's evolving at such a rapid pace. Don't ever walk into a room and think that you don't have some answers that somebody else doesn't have. So do it scared for sure. But I
Okay.
also would say that so Dave Wren, the last step that I took, you from the outside, we were talking about, what you see on social media versus what the reality is, of the actual mountain you have to climb.
Sure.
And this last step, I think from the outside, people were telling me, you've grown so much. You are where I want to be. Like, this is amazing. But for me, being asked to move from something that I had built to something that was undefined was not something. I felt like I was being punished, really. But he told me, just, if you can trust me to be comfortable being uncomfortable, then maybe you'll be able to see what I see. And so I just trusted him, and I sat in the discomfort and uncovered what was making me uncomfortable, and then studied those areas to allow me to piece it together, interviewing people, tapping into my network of people that have been in similar roles of how to do things. Chris Spenceley is someone I'd only met through digital means. And when I saw on LinkedIn that he had similar roles, I reached out and he just debriefed me on all these incredible insights. So I think just not being afraid to sit in the discomfort and ask for help. If someone believes in you and puts you in a position, that means they see something that maybe you don't.
That's awesome. And give me a sec. I'll pull myself back on the screen. But as you know, I take notes. I'm sitting here taking notes because I want to recap this because I think you said three really, really good pieces of advice for when people are moving. If you're moving from where you're at to a leadership role, or if you're in a leadership role and someone's wanting you to move to that next level, and here's what I heard you say, and I recap for people listening to the podcast later and such as well. You gave three really good pieces of advice. You said, do it scared, which is just like, say yes, do it anyway, right? Two, you said, get comfortable, be comfortable being uncomfortable, because I think you're absolutely right. We get in this phase of complacency, right? Well, but this is comfortable, right? I've got the warmth and so forth, but you sometimes have to be willing to venture out. You have to trust the people. It's so often this 8 inches between our ears says more crummy stuff to us than the outside world would ever say,
Yeah.
right? And so they see us from this totally different perspective. And then the third thing, and yeah, I don't even know if you realized you said this, is you have to be willing to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I know you said that, but you kind of end capped that being uncomfortable.
I
And
kind
I
of
think that's,
glazed through it. Yeah.
well, I think that's one of those things that is, uh, we get into these leadership positions or management positions and people think, well, they've got it all figured out. I mean, like I said, as I'm talking to you, 8-10 years ago, I'm looking going, man, she's awesome. Right. And so I'm following you to learn. And, on the other side of it, you're saying, well, I'm over here getting pushed forward, and you have to be willing to ask for help. You have to be
Yeah.
vulnerable. You have to be willing to bruise your ego and say, okay, yeah, hey, I need to know what I need to get to the next level. I think those are all very, very powerful things. Uh,
I wanna lean
yeah,
into something that you had just said.
sure.
Um, you know, I think people oftentimes confuse a leader and a manager,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
you can be both or you can be just one, and there's not a right or wrong way, but not every manager is a leader and not every leader is a manager. And
Truth.
understanding your strengths and weaknesses allows you to be a better leader and a manager. I mean, if you're going to be the people at the very top, you absolutely have to be a leader. But you also need managers. You need people that are going to check off the lists and do the operational elements, and those are two completely different skill sets. And it's rare to find it in both. A person that has both, but that
Sure.
doesn't mean that you. It doesn't mean the same thing. And if we are more aware of who we're hiring and who we're surrounding ourselves with and what their actual skill sets are, we're more likely to put them in the right seats to be able to either partner with us or lead us to where we need to go.
I think that's you're absolutely right. I would like to lean into something you just said, because you said where there's differences in leaders and managers. Because I've said that before on the show. We've had lots of people that have touched on it and said, well, a leader does this and a manager does this or whatnot. To you, Subi, what would you say are a couple of key differences? And again, I agree with you. There's no right answer. Like, there are people that are in leadership roles and there are people that are in management roles. And I think depending on personality styles, we often will put those people with certain personalities and such on a sort of pedestal,
Oh,
right? We go,
totally.
oh, I want to aspire to be that thing, and whatever that title may be. And it can be different things to different people. So for you,
Yeah.
when you're stating that, what would you say are some key differences between leaders and managers?
Yeah. I would start by saying that a manager is a title and a leadership is a quality. And
Okay.
for leadership, you want to have someone with vision. You want to have someone who can not only call themselves a visionary, but put the plan together and then be able to delegate and inspire people and motivate people and provide them the tools and resources they need to bring that vision to life. And the reason why I say that manager is a title and leadership is a quality, because some of the greatest leaders I've ever experienced are not the people at the top. And I have lived this. I believe that a single individual at the very bottom can still make a huge difference because I've lived that. And I've impacted change, and I have changed people's opinions at the very top simply by having the spirit of leadership. And as I'm saying this, it makes me uncomfortable because I don't do well at talking about myself. But I think owning that and understanding what you're capable of allows you
Mhm.
to open so many doors, not just for yourself, but for so many people, the people that you're leading. And leadership is not always intrinsically tied to your title or role, because leadership is more of a way of life, right? I can lead at church, I can lead in my family, I can lead in my personal life, I can lead in charitable organizations, and somehow still not be able to bring it into my work role. Um, or I could do all of those things or one of those things.
Sure.
That's how I would define it anyway.
I think it's an excellent definition. I think in its most simplistic form, where you said, "Hey, look, management is a title, leadership's a quality." I think that's a really, really good, grounded definition. I would agree with that. I mean, we could go on for that part for even an hour.
Oh yeah, there's
Uh,
entire papers and studies from the 70s onwards that are fascinating, that study the
Absolutely.
difference between management and leadership.
Well, and
I'm
some
a
of the
dork
things
and I like
too.
reading that stuff.
I'm with you. And as time has gone on too, where it was like, 80s was management, and then the 90s became team management, right? We're gonna add the world. Now you
Yeah.
have to manage a team. It's not just managing yourself or one or two people. And then it came into leadership and team leadership and all of these different I think buzzwords for the time. But
Yeah.
the reality is the principles and the qualities never change. It's just people repackaging it a little bit for modern times, so to speak. One thing I want to go back to, because you sent this to me in an email. I do a very limited email exchange with my guests, and so that it can be really organic and genuine. And one of the things that you had brought up early in this conversation, you said, "Hey, I had people pushing me forward and
Yeah.
growing me and allowing me opportunities. And one of the things that you mentioned, you said, hey, we should talk about the art of the pivot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that ties in, things about both in the role that you're in, moving to the next role, plus when we're talking business overall, like you are a visionary, you manage, you're the executive vice president in a company, you're an innovator. And so I think you have to see that from a macro level as well. Besides just for yourself, you got to look and say, okay, well, what do we have to do to make moves and pivot as a team and pivot as an individual? So expand on that for me, because you just had that one little sentence that said the art of the pivot. So
Yeah.
can you expand on what that means to you?
It's another thing that I've picked up from David Wren. I feel like I'm just bragging on him. And honestly, it's the greatest privilege that I have, that I talk about him as work. And it really isn't work at all. I've learned a lot, and I always try to give credit where I learn things from. So there's so many things when it comes to the art of the pivot. It's ultimately understanding when you need to make that move and how quickly you are structured and scaled to be able to do so. One, as an individual, are you hiring slow and firing fast if there's not a good fit? Are you uncovering problems and challenges and roadblocks for your team and willing to let go of systems that maybe have served you well for a decade, but don't serve you as the company you are today? Are you aware enough to want to investigate those things on a consistent basis, even if they are things that have served you and there's really no reason to look at it? So the art of the pivot to me is, as an individual leader, understanding when you yourself need to adjust your processes, your structures, the way that you engage your team based on what you're learning from them, of what their needs are, what the company stands for today, because it's an ever evolving thing. It's never the same thing. But then also, as you make decisions for an organization, this is the first time I've ever been invited to be an executive at a company this size, and sitting at the table, I get to watch these brilliant people really move this company in a way that I've never experienced before. So one example is David Wren, in February of 2020, when there was a potential possibility. He already put a plan together and went to the board, and then went to the executive team at the time, which was significantly smaller. I wasn't on the executive team yet at that time. And he laid out how we're going to keep the whole team together and how we're going to survive should anything happen. He had multiple plans that he had gotten approved. We stopped our travel before most people. We had pulled everyone and had a remote environment and prepared everyone for a remote environment for what we thought was going to be a couple of weeks, challenging weeks in the advertising realm. When
2
things like
weeks
that
to
happen,
slow the spread.
people pull budgets, and then it's done. And he had the foresight to understand all of the ramifications for all 300, 400 people at that time that he was responsible for. And everyone had pay bands and limited pay, and he took that extra time that people had and reallocated it to innovation and giving free advice to the community for people who maybe didn't have people to help with that stuff. And all of that stuff paid dividends, because by December 31st of 2020, every single team member was paid back in full for
That's
what we
amazing.
thought could never come back. And so that art of the pivot is, it's not just reacting. It's having the wherewithal, the knowledge, the network, the experience, and willingness to be wrong, to fail and fail hard, and to move quickly when you experience challenge. And I'm I I'm so proud to be a member of this team. But I learned so much from watching those types of pivots. And that's just one of the many that I've experienced.
That's phenomenal. I think one of the, well, I just sit and take all this in. Like I said, I take notes and I sit and the advantage for myself when I'm sitting and chatting with my guests is I learn so much, and it's just a great opportunity. Uh, I know if I'm learning something, I feel like we're providing really good value to the people that are watching and listening.
Of
So,
course.
a couple of the things that you brought up during that, and I think this is one of probably the most powerful questions that a leader needs to ask themselves in business. You kind of end capped it there and you said, "Are you willing to be wrong?" I think people that are in leadership roles were so accustomed to being expected to have the right answers that it is hard to um, it's hard to take that hit to the ego. It's hard to take that hit to your pride sometimes. And so I think I know I said it earlier, even in this podcast, like you got to be willing to bruise your ego. And so that question for me is, are you willing to be wrong? I think if a leader's making a decision and you're getting ready to affect not just yourself, but other people's lives, that's a solid question to ask consistently, is just sit down with yourself and say, am I willing to be wrong on this?
Yes. And it's also a good difference. Another difference between a manager and a leader is a leader fosters an environment to create many versions of themselves in order to scale and to grow. And when it comes to us trying to navigate challenge, I think it comes down to a place of, am I surrounding myself with people that can take that direction of it's okay to fail and empowering the rest of their team to also be comfortable failing, as long as we are learning lessons and applying them and moving forward, not making mistakes. It's one thing to fail, it's another thing to make repeated mistakes. And especially when you have clients that are depending on you not to make those mistakes.
Sure.
So that's, I feel, a really good leader empowers their people to fail. I feel like a commercial for Stream right now, but then that's not what I intended. But there's just so
No,
many great
hey.
leadership pieces that I have learned that I love talking about. So we have an entrepreneurial environment. Never experienced one before Stream in my life,
Okay. Been
and
more corporate.
yeah, and I mean, we weren't, right? Like when I joined, we were about 250 people. We're now
Hmm.
700. And most of that growth was after 2020 because of everything that we had done during that year, I think. I personally
Sure.
think. Um, but an entrepreneurial environment is making every single employee at the company feel like an entrepreneur, meaning you can innovate within this environment, come up with ideas, test those ideas, and then if they are successful and they bring the value that you believe that they do, then it becomes a thing. It becomes a product, it becomes a service, it becomes a department. I personally have come up with two ideas that I was fully supported by that became huge entities. And I'm really proud to work for leadership that supports that kind of environment. So, in an entrepreneurial environment, our CEO is telling us, go break things and figure out better ways to do them. And
Hmm.
that to me is the most powerful seat to be in, because I can come up with ideas that's going to better either the customer, my team. Are we going to be faster or stronger? Are we coming up with a brand new service or a technology? We now have two patents on a technology that existed out of coming up with these ideas. And I just,
Really.
it's incredible. Yeah. I really encourage people to consider this kind of, no matter what level you are, you're an entrepreneur, treat yourself like a leader within this organization and come up with solutions.
So I want to hang on two things that you said, because there's a couple of things, and I've said this in interviews myself. When you're talking about people making mistakes, I'm going to backtrack for just a second because we're talking about entrepreneurial environment. So I'm going to swing back around to that. But one of the things that you said a minute ago is like, you have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to let people make mistakes. You know, I've said this when talking with people, like, you are going to make 10,000 mistakes, and
Yeah.
that's okay, right? That's how we learn. That's how we, as John Maxwell says, fail forward, right? You can make 10,000 mistakes, but when you start making the same mistake more than once, it's not a mistake anymore. It's a choice.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
if you're
that's
going to come on, if you're coming on my team, it's okay to be prepared to make mistakes, but you have to learn from them. You're not allowed to stay in the same place and then claim that it's still a mistake. The other thing, when you were talking about that entrepreneurial environment, what's so interesting, and both of us having an automotive background, I'm still on the retail side. You obviously going to the vendor side, you started in marketing on the retail side, right? You
we
said,
did.
and
Yeah.
then moved over to the dark side, as they
The
say,
dark side.
the orange side.
There you go.
uh, the interesting thing is, I think a lot of businesses, especially in automotive, but a lot of businesses in general, will tell people, yeah, we want this to be an entrepreneurial experience. This is the opportunity to run your own business.
Oh yeah. I've
It's
heard that.
said, but it's not supported. Would you
Right.
agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the dangerous thing about culture, right? You have to mean it. Because if you don't mean it and you don't follow through, that's when everything falls apart. Because I no longer trust you as a leader. I'm not
Mhm.
willing to give you my best ideas. Um, and honestly, I think that's been one of my greatest challenges with our industry is the culture. I've seen so many of my peers who are, in my opinion, they are smarter than me. They are far better speakers than I am. Um, they just they had a lot of insights and a lot of education that a lot of people learned from. But once they took a really great opportunity, it kind of threw them in a whole different direction because there's so many people that latch onto people that are gaining popularity and promise them all of these unrealistic promise them all these things through unrealistic expectations. And
Sure.
then you see these people just kind of jump from job to job to job that really could have been something great simply because the industry chewed them up and spit them out. And it makes me so angry. And that kind of is what drives me to make this a better place because there's so much incredible talent. There's so much incredible heart in this industry that I just want to protect and and not allow this stereotype of what this industry is to people to
Sure.
be a reality for some. And the reality is it is happening. People are getting these horrible experiences both on the employee side but also on the consumer side, and one absolutely impacts the other.
100%. So let me ask you, because you talk a lot about culture. You're all about experience, both consumer experience, employee experience, and the experience that is created to help create the culture. What can an individual do, whether they are in a leadership role right now, or if like you said, hey, I was in marketing and I was still making an impact. For me, I was in sales and I was making an impact on other salespeople. Like, you start where you are.
Yeah.
What can an individual do to start to change the culture right now in their environment?
I think there is this lost art of volunteering, and all of the most successful people that I've been privileged enough to be able to connect with over this past year and interview, just picking their brain at dinner or sitting on a panel with them, all the most successful people raised their hand. They took opportunities that were presented to them that they weren't ready for. And it didn't always come with a title or a salary increase. And I know that that is horrible for some people, but sometimes when you find a problem, we beg people to take us seriously to be able to be given the right to fix that problem. Does that make sense? So, hey, I see this
Repeat
problem. I'm
that.
going to
Yeah.
propose it to you over and over and over again until you give me the go ahead and the green light to do it.
Okay.
And there are times in those scenarios where you cannot move ahead without that. But there are other times where you can get creative. You can find a solution that isn't expensive. You can find opportunities to create small change. Instead of going for the entire thing, if you get that no, start doing something to illustrate to them and make that case. Because what I've learned from the corporate side is that no one's going to just throw money at you because you think you have the best idea in the world. You have to present a case. And we oftentimes are doing one of two things. We're saying, just trust me, it's going to work. Or we're waiting for them to give us the right or the title or the money to prove our case. And every person that I've seen that has had this meteoric rise, and I would even put myself in that category because when I look back on my career, I cannot believe the opportunities I've had. And if I look back and say, how did I get here? Which I've been asked a lot recently, I would say that I took on things that were improving my business or improving my team's experience or improving the culture just because I knew I could make a difference. And not necessarily because it came with a title or a salary change. But every single time that I did that, I was rewarded by people that don't reward people. I worked for
That's
dealers
interesting.
that weren't people that would give those things out easily. And yet, if you are willing to give someone who's putting all their money on the line, I think sometimes we look at the owner as the big bad wolf that doesn't want to pay for things. And, we all sit and we complain about the boss. But if you want to look at it from their perspective, they're putting everything on the line and it's all a gamble to them and it all affects their bottom line. So if we learn to
Mm-hmm.
speak their language, if we understand what it is that motivates them and what their needs are, and we align our projects and our ideas with those things, we can get that buy-in. And even without it, we can make that case. I created a fake customer service department at my first dealership. I asked for a
Oh, here
budget
we
of
go.
$400 a
Okay.
month that I could just fix things without going to anybody, whether it be sales or
Nice.
service. And that $400 became incredibly valuable to we were making in way more money than $400.
Sure.
And I then, I needed help. They weren't willing to give me people to help me. So I created an internship department. I went to the local university and then I wrote up descriptions. I understood everything about what the internship required. And then
Sure.
I made sure I taught them X amount of time. But then what I had in my hands was unpaid interns that would get kind of a piece at the end and they would get credits for their time served and they were learning skills that they wanted to utilize for their future because I was investing a lot of time into them, but I was still saving myself a lot of time because these people were taking my pictures, writing my vehicle descriptions, they were answering leads, they were doing the customer service, they were doing surveys. Nobody was doing surveys then. We were calling
Sure.
every single person that came into the dealership and came into service. And it just, all of a sudden, I was able to hire 4 part-timers to help me because I proved my case by finding a solution.
So a few
Long-winded
really good
answer,
things.
but
What?
not
No, I think it's absolutely. There's a lot to take out of that because I think first and foremost for anybody in a leadership role, because we're here on the Leadership Toolkit, it's more important to be a problem solver than a problem spotter.
yes. Yeah.
Like if you're gonna show up and say, hey, we've got this thing, we have this thing that's not working, or we have this error, or we have this problem in front of us, what's your solution? And then backtracking, I'm walking backwards, one of the things that you said is just small changes. We get so accustomed in an internet society to seeing, well, this person, you were talking about meteoric rise. You can watch them on Tuesday when they were their startup, and on Wednesday you're watching the next video that they're worth $300 million. How long did that take? 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. It's like, yeah, but actually that's a time lapse for the past 10 years or the
Yeah.
last 5 years or the next. and then what's coming next for the person. And so I think we miss all of those small dials being turned. We expect it to be like, well, I'm going to grab this dial and I'm going to twist it here and then everything's going to be awesome. And it's like, no, there's all of these little tiny dials that took place. That 24-hour window that we just watched somebody online totally turn from the, caterpillar into the butterfly type of deal. That 24-hour period actually took place over the course of how many years, how many sleepless nights, how many volunteer hours. That's the other thing. I think that is so powerful. And to me, it seems like it's against the general sort of social norms right now, because you look on TikTok, you look on Instagram, there's a lot of people that are like, no, you shouldn't be volunteering extra time. I'm out on the 501 Express. And it's like, listen, you are missing some opportunities here to be seen and to shine your light.
Absolutely.
For what you're really good at. And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think there are generational differences, right? We can't force a generation to want to volunteer their time. But what you do is you uncover and identify the skill sets and the drive that you want for your team's initiatives. And there's a place for all of those people. There's a place for someone to shut off at a certain time and not check back in. But I work with all sorts of generations. And I'm consistently surrounded by people, or either I'm surrounded by people, or I am choosing to surround myself with people. I don't know what comes first, but it's all hunger. It's all wanting to be better and faster and stronger and to improve. And I was doing those things not for career growth, because at that time I didn't realize that that was a tactic that I could be utilizing, a tool that I could use. At that time, I was just trying to make the experience better for me and my peers. I was just trying to solve problems because I'm a problem solver in nature. Mm-hmm. And what I found was that in each of those instances where one could say, well, you were just working for free. One, I was rewarded. And two, I learned more in those moments of trying to figure out answers and trying to come up with solutions than I did doing my day job, because those were routines. And so I think that there's a ton of growth in those opportunities as well.
Well, and I think you have to ask the question too, when you really want to take it to the next level, are you expecting to get paid for your education, or do you have to pay for your education? And so time is, in my opinion, still, especially as I get older, I realize time is our most valuable currency. You're just paying for different things. So I think that's something that you bring a really good point of, hey, I learned so much in these off moments. I got so much education. Well, in general, right? If you're going to go to a great college and you're going to go get your degree and do all this stuff, you got to pay for that education also. You're just paying with a different currency. Just food.
That's a really great point. I like that analogy.
So let me ask you, because with respect for your time, we're coming right up on the 45-minute mark, and it goes so quick. Any final thoughts? Just final nuggets, something that you want to offer to the audience this afternoon?
I would say that the quote that I have no idea where I got it from, I cannot imagine that I made it up myself. I know it's from somewhere, but you're never too inexperienced to be a mentor or too experienced to need a mentor. And love that. Bridging together the things that we've talked about, I have never been an executive before. So from the outside, it looks like, oh, she's climbed so far. She's got it together. But for me, my knees are buckling. Like, well, what am I supposed to do here? How am I supposed to act? What am I supposed to do? What are my next steps? How do I engage with who are my peers even now? And so I think asking those questions and connecting with people and being okay leaving certain mentors behind or certain peers behind, not necessarily in the dust, but recognizing that different levels of your career require for you to make new connections, and then you can bring along other people. But if you stay in that circle, you're not growing, you're not really applying any new skills. And so while you've gotten somewhere, you're going to stay that place. So just connect with new people, find people at the places you want to be and start connecting with them, even if it's aspirational. But then also lend yourself, because every time I've had a mentee, I have grown so much. So that's what I would leave everyone with.
I think that is absolutely phenomenal. Again, thank you for just like
You're
more than
welcome.
anything. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and sharing with everybody. I had this on the screen a couple times, but if you're listening to the podcast, you can make sure connect with Subi on just about every social platform. It's SUBI and her last name's Ghosh, GHOSH. And then her email, subi.ghosh, same spelling, at streamcompanies.com. Because she revealed to me before this conversation that she says, look, my social's all over the place, but if you really want to connect, make sure and email her. That was what you said to me, right?
It's so true. I mean, I have like 400 LinkedIn requests, and I'm convinced that half of them are fake people. So it's not that I don't want to add you. It's that if I don't see mutual connections, I'm very suspicious now.
Sure.
Because of the number of sales messages that blow up my inbox in those things are unreal.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. If you want to hang out for just a minute while I take this out there. So again, thank you everybody for your time and joining us this afternoon. Do me a favor, if you've gained some wisdom from this episode of the Leadership Toolkit, and I know you have, make sure you share the episode. We're on every social platform, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. Share this episode out, throw some thumbs up, like the show. And most importantly, if you know somebody that this could impact and affect and help them move forward, make sure and share it with them, because I think that's one of the most awesome gifts you can give to somebody. Subi's amazing. I thank her for her time. Thank you everybody for your time and watching this afternoon. I look forward to seeing you again next week and every Wednesday, 12:05 p.m. Mountain Time. And until then, be great. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.